Which dickhead is it, Mickey 18? Keep his head still. Now I can tell you two apart. Filthy multiples.
Oh, yeah. That does seem fair. Oh, goodness. Burnt meat.
That's nothing, honey. Wait till these two are scorched sausages in the cyclone. How are you gonna handle that stench? I'm so sorry. You too. This brick stores your memories, right? Now you'll watch as I permanently delete your being from it. That way you'll understand the meaning and terror of finality. No more reprints! That's what you both should be thinking when you die. Dead forever? Now that the memory is gone, which body goes first? One at a time is twice the fun.
As a pretty brilliant high concept, that's like candy for me. Sci-fi, space travel, and the idea that you would have people whose job it is to do all the dangerous or experimental work to support the survival of the species, who die and are cloned and rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And, all of the, philosophical and, ethical, quandaries that would arise from a setup like that. Robert Pattinson is our star. It has a coterie of other well-known names like Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette. But, when you get down to it, this movie can only be described as disjointed and ham-fisted in the manner in which it delivers its message. As an experience, it just careens headlong past everything that's compelling. It's almost way too long, but it moves way too fast. You don't get time to really get settled in with the relationships that the characters are in, the dynamics that they have. There's a love triangle, for example, that get a quadrangle technically, that gets introduced at one point, and then it never really becomes relevant to the story again. It's there for a beat, and then it's gone. And that's ultimately what my beef with this whole experience was, and why it left me ultimately unsatisfied.
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck. This is episode 63. After a very long 6-year wait, Bong Joon-Ho, he's back with his highly anticipated post-Best Picture win follow-up. This time, he has chosen to adapt a book that speaks to him, a book that is firmly in his wheelhouse. The question is Bong Joon-Ho's Mickey 17 the sign of a master who's honing his craft, or is it just a recycled treadmill of ideas? We're going to get to that film a little bit later in the show, but first, we've got a healthy watch list to go over, and then do stick around after to the very end of the show to hear our non-film recommendations with the Mentionables. And if you haven't, we do always appreciate the sporadic like you can give or subscribe, just to kind of let us know how we're doing. But before we get into the meat of the show, Chuck, is there anything else that you wanted to cover right now?
Yet again, just an apology for our sporadic upload schedule. My son's upsetness right now. Remember, you need to, if you take something from a child, you better give something to that child.
Yeah.
If you are one yourself. I'll be uploading my long-awaited minisode about miniseries, but it's taken some evolution. It will now be covering the which is November.
Can you open this?
No, I can't, honey. I'm very, very sorry. And I need you not to interrupt me while I'm talking. Okay? We are going to edit this part out.
Yeah.
All right. So, it's going to be covering, between a movie adaptation or a miniseries adaptation, which is the best way to go? Is there even an argument? Because sometimes the miniseries is definitely superior, in my opinion, and I will make that argument in a few instances. But sometimes it's pretty awesome that you have a condensed 2-hour movie instead of like 6 hours of your life being spent having to endure Jane Austen or something like that. But
Yeah.
well, that's that. We also kind of missed the Oscars because last week when we were set to record, I was sick with the plague because of these little gremlins I live with here, and we couldn't function. I can't, honey. I already told you that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're late to the party here, but very briefly, what were your thoughts on the outcome from that glorious evening?
Yeah, I did end up watching the ceremony, kind of flipping through the channels every now and then, and it was expected, I think.
Yes.
I kind of I took exception this year to this sort of Anora winning as much as it did. I talked about that movie, and we'll get your thoughts on that movie today in a little bit. But I took exception to how much that movie won because I it was fine. I mean, like I said, my thoughts have been well recorded on this show in past episodes, but I thought that movie was fine. I didn't think it was anything special. And I feel as if it won so much because of the sort of either organized or disorganized, depending on who you ask, sort of smear campaigns against some of the other movies that were the favorites previously, such as the Brutalist or Amelia Perez. And I know I still haven't even seen either one of those movies, so I can't comment on the actual quality of them. But um, that's kind of the way it looked to me looking in from the outside. But yeah, otherwise. Yeah, it kind of very expected. It was a pretty spread field as far as the awards went, and I Conan O'Brien, I guess, to speak on the ceremony itself was decent as a host. You know, he brings that sort of very like non-offensive but sort of weird humor that he sort of had when he was doing his late night stint. And so that was kind of interesting. It's a lot more interesting than like some of the past hosts they've had in the last couple of years. And so yeah, it was just a fairly standard night, I thought.
Yeah, and it is funny, how so many of those like locked in winners that we had just took weird little stumbles, very close to the finish line in some cases. Like the Brutalist being, well, like their controversy was the fact that they used AI to tweak the accents of two of the actors. Is that right?
Yeah, it was I guess the what is he what is his nationality in that movie?
Polish, I believe, or Hungarian.
Hungarian, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that Hungarian is actually a pretty tough dialect to get right, and so they kind of had to tweak some stuff to make it more authentic. Is sort of what I heard the deal was.
Interesting. Okay, and yet that man, Adrian Brody, won his second Oscar, which well deserved. I'll say that. My preference this year obviously was for The Brutalist out of all the front runners. I tried to watch Amelia Perez. It just about killed me. I love Jacques Audiard. I love that dude. Like, Un Profete is one of my favorite films. I love that movie. As far as like a gangster movie goes, a prison movie goes. Like the guy is interesting, but lost the fucking plot. Like I think I love Armand White's take on Amelia Perez, as like weirdly neoconservative as he has become for a gay black film critic. It's very strange that he's the one who I think is like taking that movie and viewing it for what it is. And it's just, it's gross. It is it is an offensively simple minded film as far as like what it cares about, what it's trying to say, and how it says it. It is like a college student explaining something to a toddler. Like where they're like actually trying to dumb down something deeply complex. And in the end, if they weren't singing, I don't think anyone would find it very compelling. But the songs are awful. Okay, I'll move on from that. We don't want to spend too much time on this. But yeah, like the fact that Anora did so well, it was just the next trendy thing. Like everybody wants to support sex workers, but I have complicated thoughts about the movie itself and what it says and everything, and we'll get to that. But I do also like the idea that all movies, great and small, can succeed, at certain levels, and and for a guy that for like my consciousness I became aware of him because he shot an entire movie on an iPhone about two black transgender prostitutes, like to go from that and like Starlet, to everything he's done since then, it's quite the trajectory. But I just don't think his movies are the ones that are going to save movie theaters, and so his speech, very overwrought. Adrian Brody's speech, very overwrought. Worst things about the night was how much people talked, except for Kieran Culkin. He had my favorites. That was good.
Yeah, that was funny. It's funny how he's turned his awards acceptance speeches into like a ongoing story, an incredibly personal ongoing story that probably shouldn't be out there in the open. But he is very much like his Succession character in that way. So, that was good. I like that.
It made me want to see the movie. Like when I first saw the trailer for it, my eyes rolled into the back of my head. And I'm like, oh, this insufferable actor who I kind of like has made a movie with an actor I really like, but it's like one of the most, conventional movies ever. Okay, fine. Maybe now I actually want to see it. I also really want to see Flow. I think it's really neat, that Latvia as a nation has just made everything about their national identity about this movie. And the fact that it won an Oscar, that's really cool. And the fact that Disney hasn't won in like, what is it, like 3 years straight so far?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's surprisingly unexpected. A surprise and delight, I should say.
Yeah, because like I saw Moana 2, the other night with November, and compared to the first one, it is the most unnecessary nothing sequel. I'm sorry to be saying. Yeah, November, you can say it. Did you like Moana 2? She slept through most of it. Okay. But she did like it. She did like it. Like it just reinforced how like little genuine, like spirit there is in that enterprise anymore.
Yeah.
It's really depressing, honestly. But then we have this director who's, on paper in retirement, but has wound up being far more prolific in retirement lately than it seemed like he had been in his actual studio career. But which I guess functionally, that's what his retirement is. He's just no longer working for the man anymore. He's just doing what he wants to do. Presence has been well reviewed. That's, pretty high on my watch list right now, especially after Red Letter Media did their little write-up on it. I'm taking a lot of cues from them lately. But what did you make of Black Bag? This is like an MI6 spy thriller type of a thing?
Yeah. I love his sort of late career trajectory because he's sort of refusing to be pigeonholed. And, he's frequently teaming up with writer David Koepp, who is also having a midlife crisis where he's like this is the guy who was like a Hollywood writer for the longest time, and now he's doing these really weird screenplays because he also wrote Presence. And it's funny that you say that you heard good things about Presence, because I've heard a lot of bad things about it, as far as it being like very boring, and how the whole movie leads up to like this one like 30-second scene at the very end that the lead up doesn't really justify the payoff. But yeah, I mean, I guess mixed things is what I would say then. And So you have something like that. You have something like Presence, and then you have something like Kimi. You remember Kimi, which we reviewed on this very show, which was, a decent, but I guess ultimately forgettable, like COVID era thriller. And then sometimes Soderbergh just knocks it out of the park. And that is what Black Bag is, because this movie fucking rules. And this, he's not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but he is just doing the wheel very, very well. And this thing is a 90-minute movie, 90 minutes long. So first off, that in and of itself, it rules. We need more 90-minute movies, 90-minute good movies. And if there's anything in Soderbergh's catalog that this has any resemblance to, I guess it would probably be 2011's Haywire. In that it's a spy thriller. They're both spy thrillers, but this one is less actiony and more, John le Carré. Like you brought him up earlier in the show, and this is more like that, where but then it does have some, similarities to Haywire, in that Soderbergh has assembled this amazing cast to play every single role, whether that be the bit parts or, the co-stars of the movie. I think Haywire had people like Ewan McGregor, Michael Douglas, Bill Paxton in it.
Channing Tatum for like a scene. Yeah.
Yeah, and Fassbender was in like a scene of that movie, and he's in this movie too. And then you have this movie who, he's assembled a amazing cast again. You have Fassbender and Blanchett as the leads, and then Tom Burke from Furiosa, Naomi Harris, Pierce Brosnan, just an incredible cast. And a lot of these people are in the movie for not very long, and they all put in the work though. And I mean, the story is very, very simple too. It's basically Fassbender, he's a spy, he works for MI6. Somebody within MI6 is leaking information, and it could be any one of 5 people doing it, including his wife. His wife is on the suspect list. And so, yeah, very, very Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Again, very John le Carré. And I won't reveal much more about the plot, but the one thing I did want to touch on with this movie is its sort of underlying message, I guess, because if this has anything to say, or if this movie's about anything other than spycraft, it's sort of, to me, it's about the role of a trusting, like, monogamous marriage in the modern world, which is like weirdly old-fashioned, refreshingly old-fashioned for, a modern movie, because what you have in this movie is this incredibly close-knit, insular office of spies, and everybody's dating each other, everybody's screwing each other, everybody has dated each other in the past, or they're cheating on, their current boyfriend or girlfriend, except for our 2 leads, who are in this, like, on the surface, this presumably trusting long-term marriage. They've been in this long-term marriage, and they are sort of constantly getting one over on their coworkers because of that, because everybody else is so, steeped in jealousy and like suspicions, and they're sort of just getting one over on everybody else. And it's weird. It's such a weird message for a modern day movie, and I really, really admired it for that. And yeah, I mean, if there's anything else to say about the movie, it's, this might sound like I might sound like a massive boomer, but for the lack of a less condescending way to say this is a movie for adults. It's a theatrically released, non-IP R-rated movie that, was only put in theaters because Soderbergh's behind it, because this movie would totally have just been like shat out on a streaming service otherwise. But it's a classic genre. It has a classic old-fashioned message, and I really hope that its word of mouth carries it, like, something like Conclave, because I think this is a crowd pleaser in the making. So yeah, I mean, do go see it in theaters. I wholly recommend it. This is a perfect like date night movie. If you and the wife have a a night you can go for a date night, especially because it's 90 minutes long. Like this is
Yeah.
like it's crazy. It's great. I went and saw it with my wife, and there's just a lot of good couples stuff in there, and so yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Awesome. That's reassuring. Yeah, because I do acknowledge the mixed, because I like take for presents, but I just chalk that up to the the people who like they were the wrong audience for it naturally didn't like it, and those who could like it do. But this sounds a lot easier to swallow, a lot more straightforward, less gimmicky, and just it's to the point from the sounds of it. And mercifully, if we do get a date night and can go see it, I likely won't fall asleep in the theater, which is always a risk these days with the way that my schedule has been. So yeah, no, this is right up there. Steven is a master filmmaker. I trust him, and there's not much that can go wrong with that. So I am grateful that you did some early reconnaissance for me, because unfortunately it may just have to wait until streaming, or maybe if it gets some worthy Oscar buzz down the line, I can get an Academy screener, which is how I saw Anora. It was always a hallmark of a certain era of internet piracy where you'd see For Your Consideration flash up on the screen. So it was nice to see that old friend when I was watching this. We all know the basic plot. This is just a modern Cinderella story. Literally that's what the characters like call, her, like, you're like a Cinderella. But you have a New York stripper who, is from a Russian neighborhood. I forget exactly which borough it's in, like Brighton Beach or something like that. And because she can understand Russian, she gets pulled over, one night to dance for this, Russian dilettante who is supposed to be studying in the United States, but is instead just partying, getting high, playing video games all day long. And, he starts, paying her for the other services that she offers, which is, sex and companionship. And it just gets to a level where it's the girlfriend experience, another Soderbergh reference there. And then they have like this impulsive marriage and the fallout that comes from that. And it is a very funny movie. I was cracking up, once like all of the Armenian handlers and the Godfather start showing up and everything just, gets really zany. I was, totally, on board with it. But I was weirdly disturbed by how it portrayed the sex. It's like this almost functionally was porn at times, as far as like how it looks today in the OnlyFans era. And there's lots of discourse about like the message of the movie, like what is the meaning of that final scene. And and I think weirdly, I think the people who really booster this movie are getting the wrong takeaway from it, because like I was shattered by it. And I don't know necessarily that Baker was, trying to, say what I was receiving, but I think it just, like when you talk about, how Black Bag was, championing, the virtues of a traditional relationship dynamic. This one was just showing it's like what women lose when they embrace their empowerment and their agency to the degree that they, are just, giving away their sexual currency to the point to where it has degraded in what its real value is. Because like all she wants is that real genuine relationship, and she wholly believes that she has it, and then it's completely thrown in her face. She just, has some token money thrown at her. And in the moment where she's trying to find some sort of inkling that maybe it could be real with anybody, like, because what's the name of I can't remember the name of the character, the bodyguard guy that, she has the tender moment with, at the end.
Yeah, the bald guy.
The bald guy.
Yeah.
Who he was nominated for an Oscar. If Kieran Culkin hadn't been there, he probably would have won it for this year, just because of the traction this movie got. And
You know what? I actually think I don't think he was nominated. Was he?
He was. I thought he was.
Let's see. Oh no, you're right. He was.
Yeah.
Okay, he was. Yeah, he totally should have won. I mean, if there's any award that movie should have won for, I mean, other than, I guess, Mikey Madison deserves it to some extent, but it should have been him that won.
Yeah.
But yeah, what were you saying?
Well, she. Yeah, I guess, like, she has that one tender moment, and it gives her, but at the same time, because of everything that she's, like, given of herself in order to survive in this world, like, she can't have that. Like, she almost needed that interaction to be transactional for her to even engage in it. Even though, like, he wasn't giving her his own money, he was giving her her own money. But like before they actually consummate, or like you attempt to. And yeah, like because this movie, all these people, all their speeches were about, supporting and recognizing, sex workers. But, it quote unquote is the oldest profession. We call it that for a reason. No matter how traditional or conservative your values may be, how much of a boomer you might be about, sex and marriage and everything, that inherently we as a species have treated relationships transactionally in the past. We just don't give dowries anymore. But between two individuals, it's like, it's transactional in the sense that you are making a partnership. Like, if, like, the Dave Ramsey famously says, it's like, if you don't have shared, like, finances when you're married, you're not married. You're just roommates. And of course I am Catholic. I have a certain point of view on this. I have like a sort of like, there's a transubstantiation that happens in a covenant of marriage within my worldview. And if all that you're doing is paying for a moment with each other, you're depriving yourself of that. And I know that commitment is hard. Our generation struggles with it. So, like, I don't know, this movie made me think a lot. And for that, it's like, it's a great movie. And, I just don't necessarily think I agree with why people think it's great. You know what I mean? Yeah. Everyone can have different, takeaways. But ultimately, this movie just made me very, very sad for a whole generation of women, and there are so many movies that have come out like this, and they often are so, like, dour and cynical, like White Girl, if you recall that movie, and they just, like, leave you, completely in a nihilistic place. But somehow this movie avoids that nihilism. It still has like the music, choices that they had for this. Weirdly, like that one song about how, like, this is the greatest day of all time that plays all the time. Yeah. Like, that is a remix of a song that Robbie Robertson was in the 90s, the Take That, like, boy supergroup. Okay. After he left, in the early aughts, they did that song. And then someone remixed it, and that's what was in the movie here. So I thought that was funny that there was some kind of a connection between it all. But, like, whenever that song played, it just, like, lifted the spirit. Even at the end when everything was shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so it just left me, like, wondering, where does this person go next? And a good movie should do that. Like, it should, like, especially if it's not leaving you in a neat place. where it's like, oh yeah, like everything's settled with this character. Everything wasn't settled with Anora, and I think that is to its credit.
Did you I'm just curious, did you ever see Red Rocket?
Not yet. I need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting because I think I Red Rocket's probably my favorite of Baker's movies. I think but it shares a lot of DNA with this movie. I just think there's a lot more going on under the surface because just to kind of reiterate my problems with this movie, I thought it was way too long. It's like 2.5 hours, and there's scenes that go on forever, like when they're trying to wrangle her in like the house in like the mansion, or like the scenes of them trying to find the Russian kid, throughout New York, just like just and I yeah and the main character is so grating to me, and I only really feel bad for her. Like, her character development is pretty much non-existent through the entire movie until like the literal last minute of the movie, and then they hit you with something that's halfway interesting, that actually she shows some sort of emotion, she shows some sort of conflict, and then the movie ends. But yeah, it's back to Red Rocket. I think there's a lot more going on in that movie, but I would be interesting to see how you would feel about that movie, because man, that movie is as far as like you mentioned like the hardcore sex in this movie. That movie is pretty tough to get through in some points, because that movie is just as like sexual, but you have this 50-year-old man who is having sex with this 17-year-old girl, and so it's a lot weirder in that way. And but there's way more going on with character work in that movie, and I just think that, yeah, like I said, this movie Anora is funny. It is, at times it's really comedic, and there are a couple of really great performances in there, but yeah, just like way too long, and people are reading into it too much. And I totally agree with you about the ending, as far as like that ending should be taken as like completely devastating, like completely like this woman has never had a real moment in her entire life, and when she is faced with the prospect of finding love or finding a genuine moment with somebody, it just like completely breaks her brain, essentially. So yeah.
And because I remember when you first talked about this, you said that like it was one of those instances where the last scene of a movie almost redeems the whole experience, or like validates it. And it's like, that's very true. Because they could have shaved easily an hour off of this movie. We could have done with a few less party scenes. We could have, maybe only visited the candy shop and not the restaurant during the hunt for this guy. But I did love like when the Godfather character is like at church, and he's just like, shit, like, fuck, and it just like disrupts the whole proceeding, and he has to like be like, I'm so sorry, everything's falling apart, I gotta leave. That stuff was great, and I really got a kick out of it. When they try and get the annulment in court, that was awesome as well. Just because the person that they had playing the judge was just so authentic, and it made that whole circus just all the greater, as far as that goes. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where everybody goes from here. Like, what's Sean Baker gonna do next? And if that motherfucker has any temerity, within himself, he will just keep doing what he fucking does, just making movies with neon, just writing his own scripts, about the things that he finds interesting. I don't think he should make a $100 million movie. I don't think he can pull that off. He's a guerrilla filmmaker at heart. He should remain there. And and it's Mikey Madison. Yeah,
Mikey.
Right? Mikey.
Yep.
I didn't realize this, but yet she is the one that Leo torches with the flamethrower in
Yeah, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah.
That is so great. Like
Mhm.
like the fact that she could go from that to this is pretty cool. But
Mhm.
apparently now she is being courted by Marvel, I believe,
Ugh.
to be who fucking knows what. I have no, like, as far as wish casting goes, she's not on my list for any character except for maybe
No.
like Black Cat in a Spider-Man movie. But then again, maybe she's not right for that. Sydney Sweeney is. But
Yeah.
moving on from that.
For
yeah,
two reasons.
yeah. For two reasons. Well, three. Natural blonde. I'm assuming she's a natural blonde. And yeah, the other ones that everyone's familiar with.
Yeah.
Transitioning now to something that for me, if Severance wasn't coming out this year, this would be like my new favorite show on TV right now. And that's coming to us on Adult Swim or Max, and it's the latest offering from the guys who brought us Scavenger's Reign, which almost deserves its own watch list entry in the future once I finish watching it. But this is called Common Side Effects. It is a very adult conspiracy, like thriller comedy that is animated in this really stylized fashion about this weirdo mushroom YouTuber guy who finds the Blue Angel mushroom, which is this magical hallucinogenic that can cure anything. It can bring people back from the dead. And who doesn't want this thing out there? Big Pharma, and naturally, by extension, the U.S. government. An amazing, amazing show. I love everything about Common Side Effects. And I had seen like weird reels promoting this for like months before it came out. Specifically, the scene where the DEA agent's one sitting in the car and he just turns on that song and the other one's getting a hot dog and starts dancing to it because she can hear it in her earpiece. And I'm like, what the fuck is this supposed to be about? Now I know, and I'm all the better for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched this too. I've seen all the way up until the latest episode, and this is so strange because I wonder, I like the show. I really, really like it, but I can't put my finger on why exactly, because I think it's like, I don't think it's necessarily all that funny. You would
Yeah.
expect, especially for something that Mike Judge sort of is championing, you would expect something a little more funny, but I don't think it's necessarily, there's humorous moments every now and then, but it's not necessarily that funny. I think that the animation style is oftentimes like completely off-putting.
Yeah.
Just how like the characters look, how like stubby they are, and how like gross like their faces and like necks are. And so the animation is, though, like when they do like the trip sequences, it gets crazy, like Scavenger's Reign style animation. But yeah, it's weird because I do like this. I am inclined to watch it every week when the new episode comes out, but I can't put my finger on why exactly, because it's like it's maybe just because of how weird it is. I don't know. What keeps you watching it, do you think? What keeps you invested?
Well, it's the fact that if this wasn't a cartoon, and if this was a straight ahead like live action series, it would be just as compelling and interesting. But it's delivered in this format, so it's novel, I guess, because the humor is very subdued, and it's but the scenario, what makes it very cool, what makes it really cook, though, for me, is it's because like you couldn't, I don't know, it's basically like The Dude, a character like The Dude. This guy always has an unbuttoned like shirt on, like Marshall, the main character, with his belly hanging out, no matter the context, no matter how inappropriate it is. Like he'll walk into a North Carolina rural real estate office and just be like, hey, I want to buy some land. And they look at him and they're like, you want to buy some land? Not knowing, of course, that he gamed the lottery and won, millions of dollars so he can afford to do all the weird stuff he does. And, it tackles, some things that are relatable to me too. Like, like my grandma has pretty severe dementia, in her, in her age right now. And the female lead, I can't remember her name now for some reason. She, that her mother is, in a nursing home and dealing with that. And I found that notion really moving, that you could just give somebody anything. And it's, I guess, ultimately it's the very political, nature of its, thriller narrative. It's relevant, to me, like the power that Big Pharma has, how they just want to give us the poison and keep the cure from us, man. I am this type of guy, that's the mentality I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to see it getting, put front and center in a way that's entertaining, and how it evolves. It's like the current arc of the show is a prison drama now.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of fun, where he's being forced to try and be the prison doctor so that he can have protection from within. Like when he's like doing his little doodle about the dude's foot, and like, jotting out how he's going to try and cure it. The trip sequences, I think, like that's really the only holdover from Scavenger's Reign we have. The little white, like alien, figure that pops up every single time someone takes it. Because in Scavenger's Reign, there's a character that literally looks exactly like that. And I wonder what the connection is, if any. Because otherwise, those two shows look nothing alike and have very different sensibilities. Because Scavenger's Reign is basically just competency porn. We're just watching people do stuff with minimal talking, in a very, high concept setting. But the way that it portrays bureaucracy, it's just a very smart show.
Yeah.
For an Adult Swim product.
Oh, especially. Yeah,
excuse me.
Yeah, definitely very smart, and looking forward to seeing kind of where it ends. And I mean, no doubt it's going to get a second season. I keep watching every week when I pull up HBO Max app. They show the top 10 series on there, and this show is consistently in like the top like two to like 5, and so it's proving to be very popular. And I can't wait to see kind of where this goes in subsequent seasons.
Yeah.
And we'll see.
Because that's the chance that Scavenger's Reign never got. It never caught on with people. I came to it very late. I'm the reason why that show failed. But if it hadn't failed, we wouldn't have common side effects. Mm-hmm. And I just, if anything ever happens to Socrates the tortoise, I'm going to be so upset.
Yeah.
So upset. Our last entry in the watch list this week, is I'm doing this because Red Letter Media talked about it. I wouldn't have known about it if not for them. Got to give credit there. And the premise is you have this dying, fishing, remote, community. And one day these guys hear a crying baby. They find it like underneath a turned over boat. They rescue it. And this baby has this aura that like heals everything. We have another dementia patient who can suddenly be themselves again. That's a reoccurring theme this week. And, they just kind of change their whole community, their mini society around this little girl named Ela. And it, shows, her when she's older and, as she's, grappling with this weird upbringing she has and the way that, people treat her with like godlike reverence. And then everything that this community does to maintain their secrecy and maintain their little enclave as soon as the outside world kind of catches wind of her and things going on there. And it's a very small independent Canadian movie. I recognized one actor in this. Otherwise, it just seemed to be local talent. And anyone who calls this a horror film can't see the forest for the trees. It's not. It's just a very compelling, small, high concept little drama. And if it's the same type of thing that like Mike Flanagan maybe would like to do, but he I don't know, he wouldn't be capable of making a movie as truly resonant and like powerful. I really don't like Mike Flanagan, if you can't tell, but this one, like it's a counterpoint to something like Midnight Mass.
Okay.
Very similar movies and a lot of content. That's the other one's a miniseries, but the King Tide, it's interesting. It's on Tubi for some reason, just because it's so marginal, as a production, that it didn't have a hope of being anywhere else, and worth seeing if you can, find the time to watch it.
Yeah, that's that was my question going in to this episode, because I mean, and yeah, like you said, anyone can watch it because it's free on Tubi. But I'm curious to know. I mean, just to kind of pivot slightly, your thoughts on like what Red Letter Media is like doing nowadays, as far as like their more recent output, where it seems like they're actively like avoiding big releases or more like mainstream indies. They're actively avoiding the actual movies that like a lot of their subscribers would want them to review, sort of in favor of these movies that nobody's really seen. And I kind of go back and forth as to whether or not I think that they're like doing like a noble act to like try and uplift these very obscure movies, or if they're just like these millennial hipsters who are just overhyping like bland movies because they can say that it's something that they discovered, or like they were the first ones to it, or they were the people to make it popular. And I don't know, I just kind of go back and forth with that, because their recent content, I mean, there's other stuff too that I really don't like about their recent content, like their sort of reliance on like bringing up like IMDb reviews, like 1-star reviews where, Mike Stoklosa or whatever his name is, he just whips out a sheet of paper and reads directly from it. Like, here's a 1-star review. It just seems lazy to me. And so I don't know. What do you think about that?
Your criticisms aren't unfair or unfounded. I guess I'm trying not to be, cynical about it. I think it just boils down to, excuse me. God dang it. I think it just boils down to them being cynical about movies, cynical about having to go to theaters. They'd rather not have to do that. So I think they're more so just looking for excuses to just watch something in the comfort of their own home and then talk about it. And I don't think they necessarily like have the delusions or the aspirations of being hipster about something and being like we are the ones who liked this first. I think they just much rather talk about projects they believe are worthy of their attentions and their time. And they just kind of want to give it the due that it deserves and maybe isn't getting to a degree. They do want more people to, I guess, be more discerning about what they watch and not just follow the trends. Like I may be speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I don't think they genuinely believe they're being trendsetters. But I think they're just trying to find other things to talk about, I think is what it comes down
like basically
to.
they just do whatever they want, essentially. And they seem to have no, qualms about, because they could, I mean, if they wanted to, they could review, the latest and greatest, and, probably make their view counts like, triple or even quadruple of what they currently are. and and rake in more ad revenue, because of that. But it seems like they just don't care, and
Yeah.
there is something admirable about that, and there is something admirable about just doing whatever you want and not caring, because I do think there is some sort of, with these smaller movies, I don't think it should be overstated, but there is a value in getting your movie on Red Letter Media, because they do still, like, their videos tend to do, anywhere between 1 million and like 3 million views, depending on what, the movie is, or how long the video is, or
Yeah.
a number of factors. But so there is some value there, I think. And oftentimes, if you go down to the comments section on videos like this, like for this movie that you talked about, you'll see the director will pop into the comments and be like, "Thanks for talking about this. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it." And so, yeah, there is some value there. And so, yeah, it probably does go both ways, where, there's something to be said for just not giving a fuck about
Yeah.
your views.
Because they joked about that very thing in their Presence review, which was mostly a complaint about the theatrical experience, and how like the MPAA needs to have a I have to edit out all my coughing, a theatrical experience rating. So it's like, is this a movie where, people are eating like a 4-course meal in the theater with you? Like, will it ruin the experience or not? So like, Jurassic, World, blah de blah would be great for that, because you won't know if the chomping you're hearing is part of the soundtrack or just someone sitting next to you. You won't be able to tell the difference. You'll be fine. Everything will be loud and booming. But in a movie like Presence, if you just have people munching on popcorn next to you, it really would suck, because it would take a lot out of it. But they mentioned towards the end of that, just like as a gag, oh yeah, and see you next year where we review Captain America versus Angry Red Hulk. Just basically acknowledging we're not going to review that movie. We might talk about it a year from now, something like that. Yeah, but that's
so King Tide is worth it. That's your kind of final word on it. It is worth watching. Okay.
If you're just, you can't find anything else to watch on a given night, throw it on. It's quick and dirty. Well, you won't fall asleep watching it, and you're giving support to some small filmmakers who deserve a chance to do something else, basically. Transitioning from that, we're going to get into the main event here today. Bong Joon-Ho's return to cinemas since his triumphant success with Parasite. And that's, Mickey 17, based on the novel Mickey 7, from a couple years ago, as a pretty brilliant high concept. That's like candy for me. Sci-fi, space travel, and the idea that you would have people whose job it is to do all the dangerous or experimental work to support the survival of the species, who die and are cloned and rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And, all of the, philosophical and, ethical, quandaries that would arise from a setup like that. Robert Pattinson is our star. It has a coterie of other well-known names like Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette. But when you get down to it, this movie can only be described as disjointed and ham-fisted in the manner in which it delivers its message. As an experience, it just careens headlong past everything that's compelling. It it's almost way too long, but it moves way too fast. You don't get time to really get settled in with the relationships that the characters are in, the dynamics that they have. There's a love triangle, for example, that get a quadrangle technically that gets like introduced at one point, and then it like never really becomes relevant to the story again. It's there for a beat and then it's gone. And that's ultimately what my beef with this, whole experience was, and why it left me ultimately unsatisfied. It's just so interested in getting to its next bit and, kind of, playing to the applause, like the clapter of it all. It just wants the back pats for saying the right thing, at a time when it is needed, that it, makes it, very hard to swallow the processed meat product that it's beating you over the face with to deliver the message. And it's far less successful than another adaptation BJH did called Snowpiercer that people may remember. Like that movie was really, memorable for its time. It had a lot of big things to say about the world, which is what his Hollywood fans are all about. They loved the anti-capitalist messaging in a lot of his movies. And I think him playing to that is to the detriment of his filmmaking abilities and his abilities as a writer. This has a lot more in common with Okja, which is a movie I was completely bored with very, very quickly. And so like if you became a fan of his during his, Korean cinema arc, where everything is very mature, patient, and considered, you're not going to find any of those tendencies here. It's just an exercise in Hollywood filmmaking that allows him to make movies with, famous people, who, are fans of his, and, spend $100 million while he does so. Roughly half of this movie really proved to be effective. The other half, that wasn't Robert Pattinson, that wasn't the world building, and I guess mostly the front end of this movie is what worked for me really well. After once it just, devolves into, okay, we have to have another scene for Mark Ruffalo to, ham it up, and for Toni Collette to just talk about sauces. I didn't quite understand that. It just, devolves into, trite, navel gazing, and everything just like circles the drain, especially when the worst offender shows up. Everything that, is, given to you, that you could latch onto eventually is just dangled over the matter recycler and then dropped in there. And it just careens headlong towards its conclusion, which, it's exciting and the stakes are high and everything. It just gets a little too cute with its ending. And ultimately, this is an unsatisfying and disappointing film from someone who is a master, in modern world cinema. And we can only hope that the box office bomb this movie is proving to be will nudge him towards something smaller on the next turnaround. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I'm kind of on a similar wavelength. This movie to me, it feels like, so the book Mickey 7 is a 300-page book, and it felt like the producers were like, okay, we're going to adapt the first 50 pages of this book and the last 50 pages, and then we'll just randomly select an assortment of other pages from the other 200 to adapt. Many, many things left unexplained or just shallow. Big ideas that go nowhere. You've already sort of talked about how, Bong Joon-Ho, he's just doing a retread of his previous catalog. He's mixing his movies that he's, done in the past, like Okja and Snowpiercer. And I mean, there's even, elements, or a lot of elements of Parasite in here too, just done in a completely different way. And it's just it's so scatterbrained, this movie. I mean, it was entirely a mistake to throw out this like the human printing storyline just like in the middle of the movie. It's like that is the movie for the longest time, and then it's just thrown out and sort of in favor of this like colonization ecological message. And from there on, the movie is just constantly like picking stuff up and throwing them back down and picking something else up and throwing it back down. And the human printing aspect almost seems like set dressing now, especially with how little we got of all the other Mickeys. It's like
Yeah.
this movie was sold as like, oh, there's going to be all these Robert Pattinsons running around and they're all going to have like different personalities, and none of that happens. And yeah, I don't know. They could have devoted its running time to more interesting questions that these scenarios brought up. But instead, it's like we're going to devote an entire like 15-minute chunk of this movie to the idea of, oh, what would it be like if you had a threesome with yourself
Yeah.
and your girlfriend? And it's like, okay, I mean, this is sort of a funny scene. This is sort of a wacky sort of hijinks ensue, but is this really like the most interesting like path we could have taken with this human printing cloning thing? I don't think so. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I was left with it. I think okay, there is the glaring weakness of this movie. The thing that handedly brings this movie down like an entire peg for me is Mark Ruffalo. Like
Yeah.
he is whatever he is doing is like the opposite of carrying the movie, because it's like I don't understand what he's going for. I think he's completely miscast. He's like sort of this Trumpian, sometimes a British accent sort of like slips out of his mouth. And then it almost seems like at some points he's stuck in like poor things mode with his character. It's so weird. And like that character needed an element of like menace to it, of scariness, of menace. And Mark Ruffalo really isn't capable of that. Like it should have been an actor that would have been better in that role would have been somebody who could have been just as hammy, but then brought like an element of like scariness to it, like an Ed Harris, or like if he was still alive, like a Dustin Hoffman.
Yes.
Or not Dustin Hoffman, not Dustin Hoffman.
I know who you're
Dennis
saying.
Hopper.
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper. Like there needed to be something menacing about him, and it's just fucking Mark Ruffalo, and he's not scary. He's never been scary, and yeah, I hated him in this movie. And
my mind went to
Yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. And so I guess that's kind of where I was left with things. But there's just so many questions I have about like stuff happening in this movie. And maybe you brought up the sauce thing, and Toni Collette's character is obsessed with sauces, and like more specifically like sort of the like gastronomy of using this planet's native creatures as food. And I don't know, do you have any theory as to what that is, other than just being like, oh, she's rich and so she can afford, her palate is so much more refined? Is there anything behind that? Like,
Yeah, I think it's partially wrapped up in because this colony mission is in part like funded or led by this quasi church corporation that isn't really explored deeply enough beyond that. It must be some kind of jingoistic Christian thing. So like it's manifest destiny. It's like like we came across the ocean and colonized North America, and everything there, the fruits of this land now belong to us and will sustain us, and we will make a more perfect race out of it. And like that's why like I found it so like inauthentic during that dinner scene when Ruffalo's like talking to that female like aide, and he's like, oh yes, you're perfect, you're just the kind of specimen we want propagating the species here. And she's like, oh, am I just a uterus to you? It's like, bitch, you would be indoctrinated into the cult of this company You would not be calling him out like that. So like, and that's where like it all kind of it falls apart to a degree, because if they truly are living in this awful dystopia, you wouldn't be able to have that perspective. It would be beaten out of you, and and that line and that character is just there, so that can be said. And
Yeah.
and that's where it's not as inspired as people think it is, because the fans of this movie are loud, online at the very least, and they find a depth in it that I just could not find. My eyes were just rolling out of my head throughout most of those scenes in particular, because the creepiness of this reality was what was working for me initially. And I've in my further research, because it's told from like a first person perspective in the novel, there's an entire section where it's just Mickey reading about the history of colonization and of the human printing technology, and how like what made duplicates be banned was this guy who they've substituted that narrative with the guy who's a serial killer who helped create the technology. But in the book, it's this guy who took over a colony with an army of himself and like replaced everybody with himself. And so they just had to obliterate the whole planet to like deal with the problem. And then they were like, okay, anytime someone makes a duplicate, we kill them both, because we just can't have this happen again. And I don't know why they didn't just go with that. That imagery is a lot more evocative than, oh, we have a guy killing hobos. Like they left good material, in the source material that, that maybe would have been more expensive to make. But I mean, they were blowing their money everywhere else. The production value is awesome. Like the ship itself, and like all the nooks and crannies of it. And I guess the aliens are right, in the Bong Joon-Ho wheelhouse of gross things that are endearing. So like there's so much that could have worked well if they just hadn't been so indulgent in these other areas and just been more straightforward about it and authentic about it. And as far as like there was part of me that like wanted to roll with what Ruffalo was doing. It was like because it's so painfully obvious, I can get it, but they made it like so blatant for the smooth brained out there. And I guess this is the larger problem with Hollywood right now, is that no matter what the movie is, no matter how intellectual it is trying to be, they can't help but just cater to the lowest denominator of the audience, to the degree that everyone's disrespected. It's like, I don't know how anyone could watch this and not feel condescended to. And there's other movies, like it that I could compare it to. Like they don't trust people to be able to pick up on things themselves. They have to throw a wink and and smack you over the head and be like, see what we did? See what we're saying? Like it would be a much more successful movie had they not done that. And I wonder why he did.
It's funny that you bring that up, because that is, I mean, the movie seems to have two conflicting problems going on at the same time, where you said, there are certain elements of this movie that are so over-explained, just kind of spoon-fed to you like that. And then you brought up the people who are, trying their hardest to like this movie, trying their hardest to find the most positive things they can say about it, just because they want this movie so bad to be successful. And when you have those people, they are filling in the gaps with their own like headcanon. This isn't a movie where, this isn't a movie where it's being subtle and it's leaving morsels, or it's leaving crumbs for you to sort of fill in for yourself in like a smart way, like you as the audience are doing a little bit of legwork to kind of fill in the gaps. This is a movie that is leaving gaping holes that people are just like implanting their own completely made up shit into. Or, I mean, I haven't read the book, but or it's people who have read the book and they're basically using their foreknowledge of the book to fill in those gaps, which should not be a requirement to see a movie. You should not have to read a book in order to get the movie that it is based on. And so, fuck those people, first of all. And, second of all, there's just, I just have so many questions about how much, like um, like the car accident that his mom was in. Like, what the fuck was that? And why is there a red button? And what is that? And is it like NOS? Like, did she have NOS in her car and he pressed it and then suddenly the car like veered off the road? Or like, you brought up the company as a church. That is so badly explained, because there are points where it's like, what is this? Is this a company masquerading as a church, or is it the other way around? Is it a church masquerading as a company? How much does Ruffalo actually know? Is he oblivious to it? Is the bald guy running everything? Because at some points it seems like the bald guy is like behind everything, and Mark Ruffalo is just Mark Ruffalo is just the pawn. He's the face of it. And so yeah, I mean,
and again, that's if to really appreciate what they're doing there, I think you have to be really plugged into the politics of the moment and really concerned with the the inauthentic Christianity of Donald Trump. That's what they're talking about there. Like
okay.
That's what they're pointing to. Because that's the big question about a lot of his social policies. As a historically a business Democrat, who seemingly only embraced social conservatism to the degree that it could get him elected. And that's the thing. There is so much of the current moment that drives the messaging of this. The whole idea, because we're just a few degrees of separation from this kind of becoming our reality, where we have like a first church of Trump, with Elon Musk as its pope colonizing Mars. You know what I mean? Like there's parts of it where it's like, I totally see what you're trying to say here. I get it. But they don't get into it themselves. And they maybe should have given us more grounding for the reality of this movie. But instead of just being like, oh, we're satirizing reality. Oh, okay, great. I have nowhere else to go now. There's nothing else for me to really, I can't think any further beyond that. And yeah, it would have been more interesting to try and glean something about the universe itself. Like, what is the theology of this church? Like, what are they about? Genuinely. Because then it would make the weird sermons that Ruffalo gives, a little something more to go with.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Trump thing, because a lot of people are talking about that. That's probably the most interesting thing about this movie, is what's happening off the screen, because this movie was delayed twice, and it was finished in late 2022, and it was delayed.
Crazy.
It was delayed indefinitely, because of the writer's strike. And then it was delayed again from January of this year to March. And we don't really know what was behind that second delay. I mean, I guess it's assumed that, March is a better time for movies that they think are blockbusters, which this has the budget of a blockbuster. But it's funny, because in that time from when this movie was finished and now, Trump won the election, and I don't think they thought he was going to when this movie was made. That. And so, that is probably the most interesting thing about this, is kind of its dichotomy with the real world like that.
Well, it's almost, it's similar to how, like, when Trump won the first time, that South Park didn't have an episode ready for that eventuality. You know, because the in this, you know, the Trumpian figure is a two-time loser who just says, "Fuck you, you won't elect me. I'll just get off this rock." You know, and I'll have my own, you know, civilization that I run with blackjack and hookers. You know, the funniest, like bits from the beginning were when he's like talking about how, like, oh, you have to conserve your calories, so that means no sex.
Yeah.
Like, and like there should have been a lot more discontent amongst the people on this trip just over that issue, in my opinion. But then again, if they're all true believers, they'll just go with whatever the boss man says, So, the yeah, it's like, we get it, guys. We understand what you're trying to say here. Does this make for an entertaining movie? Not necessarily. For the average viewer, probably not, no matter how much you dumb it down.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up, just so I'm not like completely shitting on the movie here. You brought up some of the stuff that you liked about it, like as far as the designs and stuff like that, and the beginning. I do think this movie started pretty strong, as far as maybe like the first half hour, but yeah, I did like, just to like say some stuff that I did like. The supporting cast I thought was overall pretty good, but we just didn't get enough of a lot of them. Whatever Cameron Britton was doing there,
he was great.
I was here for him. Yoon, I didn't really understand a lot of what Yoon was doing, but I always like Stephen Yoon popping up and stuff. And I mean, even Naomi Aki, in the scenes that she was in, she was a good foil for him. And a lot of the supporting cast was good. I did like them, and so there's just not enough of them. There's too many of them, first off, and there's not nearly. I mean, you have these bit parts that are just not like. You have the woman who creates like the translator.
Yeah,
like,
I was gonna call her out too.
Yeah, like I wanted more of her. I wanted more of what she was doing. She seemed to be in some ways sympathetic to Robert Pattinson's character at points, and sort of conflicted about her job. And then, there are certain moments in the movie too where I felt like the emotionality did work. There's a lot of moments where it didn't, but there were some that worked for me. Like for instance, when Naomi Aki's character like crawls into the tube with Robert Pattinson's as he's dying of like that
pathogen, like nerve
gas.
gas.
The pathogen.
The nerve gas thing.
Yeah. Like that worked for me. But there's just not nearly enough of that type of stuff.
And initially I hated Naomi Aki's character. Like the who she was. Like she's doing fine, but I was like, "Oh, I don't like this lady." I especially when she's like, "Ooh, two of you." Because she's just gacked out on that drug, yeah, and all that. But then, by the end, like when she's saving the baby alien by having to like hold it in her teeth, like I was more on board with her. I was like, okay, you're not just out for your own self interest here. You're like, and obviously there's other scenes to prove that. And the weird thing at the end where she's the president all of a sudden, it's like that just that felt a little out of left field.
Yeah.
Well, like initially I didn't realize that it was a dream, but that part at the end where he imagines, or like he has a dream where the two villains have like reprinted themselves. Yeah. Like, what did you make of that scene?
I have no idea. Like I mean, it's just, I don't know. I guess it's just his trauma, I guess. I have no explanation behind it, because I mean, it's basically Toni Collette is, there at the printer, like talking about her food again. And then she is simultaneously reprinting Mark Ruffalo. And I didn't, the first thing I thought, I wasn't, I didn't realize it was a dream because I wasn't even thinking about that aspect. I was more so thinking about like, oh my God, did they just like serve us up like like a false ending? And now we're gonna get like 20 more minutes of this fucking movie,
That would
And
be terrible. Yeah.
thank God it wasn't like it wasn't like I gotta kill Mark Ruffalo again now, type of thing.
It's the geniuses on the internet informed me that it was just him realizing that fascism never dies. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, sure. Okay.
that's what it boils down to.
Okay. I can
But
see that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, initially I was like, what the like is this a memory? Did this actually happen? Like what the hell? Like yeah, cuz there is a sequel to the book. And
Okay.
there could be a sequel to this movie where it just explores Mickey having to live, a reality without the possibility of a backup and like and what that means for him. But
Mm.
I don't think I want it. I think this was
Yeah.
enough. Maybe if they got
And
it
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen.
I mean, this movie bombed hard, and yeah, um, I mean, it's I guess to kind of lead us to the end of our review here. I mean, the movie is a certified bomb, and I don't think Bong Joon-Ho ever had any business directing a film this expensive. And I do, like you said earlier in the show, I think that like someone like Sean Baker, I hope that this is sort of his wake up call to be like, okay, I need to go back to, smaller budget type stuff now because this did not work.
Go back to Korea. This is like get away
Yes.
from Hollywood, man. Go
Yeah.
back to your roots. Do something that you can do. Because he has an outsized idea of what his capabilities are. And then again, like very capable filmmaker, like there's this movie is made well, like in a technical sense. It just didn't succeed because he had so many other things going on, and instead of committing to any of them, it was just a machine gun, and he didn't hit the mark anywhere, for the most part. And
Yeah.
it's and having Ruffalo in this, I know that he's been talked about as being part of the like, I think it's going to be a miniseries sequel to Parasite made for American audiences.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And like that hasn't materialized, yet, which is surprising. And I wonder if it still is going to happen. And I deep down hope it doesn't. Because it's just like how we're going to be getting a David Fincher Squid Game, at some point here. I cringe at the thought of that, but it's inevitable. We're going to be getting all of those things. So catch this on streaming, I suppose. But the death of its ambitions is already written in stone at this point. Moving on to the mentionables. It's kind of an Oscar theme for you, but it's also get out and enjoy some local art.
Yeah, so I went back to my hometown like 2 weeks ago, and before the Oscars, the local Fargo Moorhead FM Symphony had a night at the Oscars where they performed a bunch of. They basically get up on stage with their orchestra. They play a bunch of movie scores along with video clips from those movies. I guess this is the 6th year that they've done this, which is news to me because I don't live there anymore. And but for my first time, being there, I found the music selection was varied, and it was all encompassing, which I really, really liked because I've been to similar concerts like this before. These sort of like movie score concerts where an orchestra plays a movie score, and sometimes they get a little too populist with their song selections, where it's like, we're going to do Indiana Jones and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and James Bond. And, this was very curated, which I appreciated, diving into some lesser known stuff. There was, they did some selections from Bridge on the River Kwai. They did some stuff from the Mask of Zorro.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
like the Antonio Banderas one. Gone with the Wind. They did some stuff from Dunkirk, the Christopher Nolan movie. So yeah, it was pretty all encompassing, and I really enjoyed that. And to tie this into something more. I mean, because this event is past now, but to just tie this into something that is more useful for the audience, I guess. Go and see if you have a local symphony, go and see them because it's almost magic what they can do. That this collection of like 60 people can get up on a stage and be just so in tune with each other, just so like on the ball. And yeah, every time I go to one of these things, I'm just amazed by how, what a production it is.
Yeah.
And if you live in a city with, I don't know, more than 50,000 people, you probably have a local orchestra, whether that be like a professional one or just like your local college. Um, most colleges put on public performances. So, yeah, go see a orchestra concert.
Yeah, the Minot Symphony Orchestra, they're celebrating their centennial this year, and they
Hmm.
have a couple of events like this planned. The big coup was that they were able to get the rights to do the Lion King from Disney. So along with the, I
Oh,
guess
nice.
like
Yeah.
their whatever, I forget which choir company, they're going to be doing that, coming up here, I think in May. So I'm
Hmm.
looking forward to that. I did a story about them that they're pretty excited about all that. My mentionable, I kind of audibled because some developments occurred, uh, but coming up here on after March 17th on Monday when this episode goes live, probably starting in Tuesday afternoon, Court TV was granted, the permission to do gavel to gavel coverage of the Nichole Rice trial in Grand Forks. This is a case that, if true crime, North Dakota, it's the most prominent one that we have. Anita Knudsen was murdered in her off-campus apartment in 2007. She was just like a year or two older than me at the time. And they never made any arrests. They never found any concrete suspects. And after they got the cable, like Oxygen Network show Cold Justice to help them investigate, they eventually narrowed in on her roommate at the time as her killer, and allegedly. And that I've been covering this trial basically ever since I started working at the Minot Daily News. The can's been kicked down the road so many times. Local media coverage and the exposure from the from that documentary show kind of made it, and then it's the 15 years it took to make an arrest made it so that they could not impanel an impartial jury in Ward County. So it's been moved to Grand Forks. And
Okay.
the struggle with my little paper was, how the hell are we going to cover this? Because it's going to be like almost like 2 hours away, and my paper's not going to be paying for me to be in a hotel in Grand Forks for 3 weeks. You know what I mean? So very fortunately, after a lot of back and forth, Judge Hagar ruled for expanded media. So now not only can you watch this on Court TV if you want to, but I'm going to be able to cover it via Zoom, which is great because I can just do it from my desk.
Yeah.
And she's innocent until proven guilty. I fully appreciate that. I also appreciate the desire for the Knudsen family and like all of her friends and this community to have some closure at long last, because that sign that was just up there, I took that photo for the paper. That sign had been there in some shape or form for more than a decade. I passed it every time I would drive up to Minot on 83. And if they could get some conclusion to this, that'd be amazing if they can make the case. But that's what's always exciting about a murder trial. I want to know what the defense is going to do to try and prove her innocence here.
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'll probably do another mentionable update on this as it progresses in the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I'd imagine this is going to get some pretty wide ranging coverage, and that's cool that you put up the screen cap, yeah, right there, that you took of your article there that you wrote. And I got to imagine that seeing something like that probably never gets old. I went
No,
if
it
I if
doesn't.
I was if I was in your job, seeing my name on like a newspaper article like that, I would think that's something that never gets old. But I just kind of that popped into my head as I saw that there.
It's the biggest perk of the job.
Yeah.
When I got my first byline, it meant everything to me. And
Mhm.
even if it's just about a spelling bee, or just like a school board meeting, like it's still it's exciting, and I have an archive, a trove of old papers that I've been hoarding, ever since I started working there, and someday it'll make a nice little scrapbook. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, especially with this particular case, to because like that's how long it's gone on. Everyone who started writing about this back in 2007, those detectives that were investigating it had long retired by the time
Mm.
I came on the scene. And because like she was arrested a month before I started working there, and then I got to cover her preliminary hearing later that fall, and so many subsequent hearings. It almost has been annoying how long it's been around, and how my boss is always like, hey, did you see there was a hearing scheduled for tomorrow? Are you going to be able to go? And it's like, oh, on top of everything else, I guess I can give these people more time for something that's just going to be a waste of time, because they have come up with so many reasons to continue. And like, to Judge Hagar's credit, in February there was a hearing where both parties were like, hey, we're not happy with this thing. They're not doing discovery right. They're not giving us enough time. And he was just like, motherfuckers, your law licenses are on the line. If you even talk about any more delays of this case, we've punted it, like, for this reason and that reason. And unless it's like the most dire reason in the world, we are going forward. So,
Sure.
and grateful that I'll be able to cover it, because
Mhm.
and to be able to get a broadside photo of this woman, as you can see in this clip, as soon as she enters or exits a courtroom, she has a phalanx of family members to stop us from getting photos or video directly of her. And
Mhm.
so I just run her mugshot, because that's all that I have.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that's it's always nice to talk about my job, on this show, when it's relevant. And yeah, hopefully yeah, if you're curious, if you're flipping through cable, or you want to check out what's going on in court TV, you'll get the latest on that one. And yeah, because it's a complex case when you get down to it, and very fascinating. And it's always interesting to actually be a part of a true crime story, because like I've been asked to participate in a bunch of those kinds of documentary shows for other cases
Mm.
that I've written about, and my boss always says no, because like he just doesn't, he just doesn't want me using my time for that. And there's always
Sure.
a part of me that selfishly is like, but it would be so much fun. Like,
Yeah,
I could
that'd be
I
awesome.
could break my suit out of mothballs and be on camera. And so like, and I have producers reaching out to me on LinkedIn trying to coordinate because I ignore their emails. And it's just like, the attention's nice, and I won't be able to fulfill that, dream of being, on camera like that. But that's
Mhm.
another perk of the job. What it was not a perk of the job this week, though, was having to watch Mickey 17. It could have been so much more, but we did have some good things to talk about. Anora, a worthwhile, film. Black Bag is on the top of my watch list. Everybody watch Common Side Effects so we get more seasons, and check out The King Tide. Please do that. What are we going to be doing on our next episode, Matt?
Well, I guess it's kind of up in the air right now, but it's probably either going to be Death of a Unicorn if if A24 can, get their shit together and actually release this in a, substantial manner across the United States. But if not, then I believe we are going to be doing the Prime Video movie Holland, which is from Mimi Cave, the director of Fresh, the Hulu cannibal movie from a couple years ago.
Looking forward to whichever direction we go. Yeah, look out for like my minisode. Then Matt will have another minisode coming as well about the implosion of Amelia Perez. I'm looking forward to listening to that. And thank you all for watching, and have a good week.
Yeah. See ya.